Welcome back to the Biblical Conservative channel. As you all are aware, there are a number of issues that we're facing in our criminal justice system. It seems as if there is a tendency by certain activist judges to place the interests and values and concerns of criminals over citizens. And what happens when a criminal, a person that's awaiting trial, has electronic monitoring and they choose to take it off? And what about this deal with no cash bail? That was a deal that some of the progressives and leftists were pushing some years ago. So today we're going to have a conversation with Ken Good. We're going to talk about the no cash bail, talk about electronic monitoring, and talk about anything else relates to bail bondsmen and those kinds of things. So without further ado, let's welcome in Ken to this conversation. Ken, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, if you wouldn't mind just giving my audience a little bit of background about yourself and how did you end up where you are today?
Well, I think that it would be hard to say I didn't get here without, the help of God. Especially with my background. My grandfather was a sharecropper. And so he always worked for someone else. And so his benefactor paid for his daughter to go to college or to start going to college. She met my dad at that college. They got married. They both dropped out of college, but then they had 4 kids in 2 years and 5 months, and they decided we're not going to be able to raise our kids without a college education. So my dad went back and finished school, and then after we were all in school, my mom went to college and finished school. And so I remember actually attending my mom's graduation. And so they became public school teachers, and they taught us, you kind of have to say based on the time frame. They told my brother and me that we would always go to college, and they told my sisters that they would get married, have kids, and then they would go to college. And essentially that's what happened. My mom and I also used to stay up Sunday night and watch Perry Mason. And so as a result of that, I wanted to become an attorney. I didn't really know what an attorney was. That was my goal. That was my dream. It really wasn't a goal at that point. And so I went to college. I worked almost full time in college. I graduated a year early, but as a result, my grades showed that I graduated a year early and I worked full time. So I got a master's degree in education. I taught high school for 2 years, and then I applied for law school and I got in. And so I went to law school. When I graduated, I had this really great attorney teach me how to practice law. I was on court TV very early in my career. I argued my first case at the Supreme Court of Texas as a 4-year attorney when I looked so young that, I would go before a judge and he'd say, "Mr. Good, when your dad gets here, we'll start." I don't look that young anymore. But I met my wife, after I became an attorney. We met on a blind date. She's also an attorney. We have 2 kids. My oldest just got married. My youngest is a senior in college. So I feel very blessed. But during the time when I was practicing law, probably 15, 20 years ago, there was a bondsman that got in trouble, had some default judgments, and he asked somebody, "Who do you hire?" And they said, "You need to hire an appellate attorney," which was one of the things I did. And so they hired me to help with that. And then as word of mouth spread, I started representing more bail type issues. I'm Texas counsel for a couple of insurance companies now. I represent bondsmen across the state. I've written articles across the country on bail reform, what's good bail reform, what's bad bail reform, what doesn't work. We also have our own podcast called The Bail Post, where we talk just about criminal justice issues, what's good, what's bad. So when AOC says we need to defund the police, we go into the studies that show when you defund the police, crime goes up 75%, and how idiotic that is, and that's just pejorative. That's just focused, or that's focus grouped jargon that's not policy. Never has
Mm-hmm.
been. Never will be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, and that kind of brings you up to today. I mean, I've been doing this now for over 35 years, 30, more than that, 36, 37 years. I still enjoy it greatly. I'm very busy as an attorney, and I highly recommend it. But I would say one of the lessons that I would say is you've got to know who you are
Yeah.
as a person, like a Christian. I think you got to have a moral base because you will be asked to do things, and you have to be able to stand up and say, no, I won't do that. Or
Mm-hmm.
no, that's against my beliefs. Because it's really easy sometimes for people to ask you to sell out your beliefs. And if you don't know who you are as a person, that's easy to do sometimes. And so I grew up at church. My grandfather, who was a sharecropper, was um, a deacon. And so my dad was a deacon in church. And so I think my dad kind of went the opposite direction. Everything to him was black and white. And I told him, sometimes when you're on city council, everything's not black and white. Sometimes things are gray, and you can let somebody else make the motion, and it might not be what you wanted, but it gets to the same result, and you've built an ally. And I don't think he really understood that. I don't think he ever learned that. But there are things that we don't compromise on, betraying people, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
selling your soul, or trying to get a quick fix for something that is not right.
Right.
When somebody makes a pass at you, when you're married and you're a Christian, you know what the answer is. And so I think those are all good examples that would do us all some good today. Like when these groups are hiring mobs to go out and do protests, I think we would be a different country today if we had mobs with a moral compass to say, no, that's not right. But we don't
Yeah.
have that for large parts of our country. And we have politicians who are selling out, whether it's criminal justice reform or just, fraud, so that
Mm-hmm.
they can make a buck. We need a little bit more of a moral compass in our country in those areas.
I know we talked about how the left and the progressive, they love to talk about the criminal justice system. They love to attack police. They love to attack bail. There's no cash bail. Could you give me your thoughts on what would happen if, for example, in our country, let's say if somebody gets elected as a democratic socialist and they immediately, go to this no cash bail and they defund the police or they are very hostile toward police. In your opinion, what would happen in this country?
Chaos,
Yeah.
absolute chaos. Um, we had the George Floyd protests, riots, whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
call, but there was this CHOP area around there. And so there's been a lot of studies, and there's been some scientific reviews and reports about that. And so we had a 3-week time where there was no police presence for the CHOP zone. And then there's the buffer zone around it. And then there's the rest of the precinct. And so from taking the police away, well, there was ramifications. The city got sued, and they were sued multiple times, and I think they ended up getting judgments against them for like $2 million one time, and like maybe 10 or 20 on another case
Wow.
for not providing a police presence. And so, but that study and that report showed that without a police presence, but the equivalent of defunding the police, crime went up 75% in the CHOP zone where they police, but in the surrounding buffer, it went up a substantial amount, maybe even 50%. And then in the whole precinct outside of that, it went up 25%. So it has a dramatic impact on crime. I mean, criminals see that as a green light to commit more crime, and not just commit more crime, to commit crime, because there's
Mm-hmm.
no accountability. When you get rid of the police, I mean, who are the police? If you think historically, who's the police there to protect? They're to protect the criminals from society. When they get
Mm-hmm.
arrested, they're actually protecting them from the mob. Well,
Right.
when you don't have a police, the mob runs everything, and the criminals get right in there with it, and so it creates chaos. There's some philosophies that teach us that, we compromised our power to come together as societies, and the compromise is to get public safety. So if we don't provide public safety, then we have a breakdown of our pact. And so we go back to what we were originally, and that is everybody fighting for each other's power.
What is specifically wrong with no cash bail? If you wouldn't mind just touching on that a little bit, because people will hear that and say, I don't see nothing wrong with it. A lot of people don't even understand the bail system to begin with. But what is specifically wrong with no cash bail?
Well, no cash bail is a term that I think President Trump has created, but it just means, simple release. So no cash bail, because bail is regulated by the states. So simple release is called different things in different states. So like in New York, no cash bail would be released on no bond. In California, it'd be released on zero bail. In Texas, it would be released on a personal bond. But they're all the same thing. You're released on a promise to come back, and that's it. And, the purpose of bail is to give assurance to the court that you will return to answer the charges against you. So it doesn't have anything to do about a presumption of innocence. It's all about what assurance are you giving the court that you'll return. And simple release or no cash bail releases is you're not giving any assurance other than your promise. And the problem with no cash bail is it carries such a high failure to appear rate. And, a criminal case can't go forward without the person, except in very limited circumstances, like if you've already started trial.
Right.
And so if someone misses court, you have to put the case on hold until they come back. And so these simple release mechanisms just create complete chaos from the standpoint of you can't hold anybody accountable. So let's make it a real simple analogy.
Yeah.
If you have 1,000 people that are supposed to show up for court in a week, if you use the private industry, the private bail system, they have a less than a 10% failure to appear rate. These simple release mechanisms have a 50, 60, 80% failure to appear rate. So can you imagine at 1 week, you've got 1,000 cases, people that are supposed to appear. You've got 100 to reschedule versus 500 versus 800. And then you're going into the second week for another 1,000. Then you're going into the next week for another 1,000. When you use these simple release mechanisms, the failure to appear rate is so high, you can't hold anybody accountable because you just don't have that much jail space, especially for misdemeanors. And so the criminals learn that, and so it puts pressure on backlogs. The way the courts fight backlogs is to dismiss cases. And when you start dismissing cases, criminals see that as, hey, this party, let's commit more crime because nobody will be held accountable. And that's what we're seeing in our urban areas.
So is the backlog because there's a lack of judges? What's the reason for this huge backlog?
Well, I mean, so, think of this as a conveyor belt. The criminal justice system is a conveyor belt. We're always adding the same average number of cases every year. And so if you don't resolve the same number of cases, that increases the backlog. Yeah. During COVID, when we shut down everything, we were still arresting people. So that is an example of where the backlogs grew. But, just in general, if you're look in Chicago, if you're arresting, 10 people a week for murder, but you're only able to try for a court 1 or 2 a month, you can see where if you don't add courts, your backlog is going to come just from the inability to resolve cases. The defendants realize, hey, I'm going to make them go to trial on me. Well, that they may get your case resolved eventually, but that's going to create additional backlogs. So part of it is intrinsic, part of it is, we have this city within the city of people that commit crime. So we have the same group committing, 60% of all crime. But there's this buffer area of people that are watching. So when we're tough on crime, they're going, oh, I'm going to walk the straight and narrow. But when we're soft on crime, they're like, oh, I'm going to join the crime city because there's no consequences. There's no accountability. Right. We're in a period where, the crime city is kind of getting away with a lot of stuff in our inner cities. And so the
Yeah.
buffer area is like, I'm joining that. And so we need a tough on crime period to get people to change their mindset. And when that happens, crime will start going down and we can start addressing backlogs even more. But I mean, there's only a few ways to get rid of backlogs. I mean, you can add more courts. Courts don't like to do that because once you add them, it's hard to get rid of them. You can add some temporary courts. But the biggest way to resolve backlogs is to dismiss cases or discount crime by giving them a more favorable punishment if they plead guilty.
Yeah. Or so, for example, I definitely so many directions we go in. So I'm in Charlotte, and you probably heard about the case of Irina Zaruska, the young lady who was unalived on our light rail system here in Charlotte. The person that committed that crime was released over a lot of, I don't know how many times he was released.
Yeah.
Is that part of the backlog system? These soft on crime DAs and people and judges.
No,
That
but it's
yeah.
his situation is a different part of this soft on crime, bail reform, criminal justice reform, because historically we have gotten rid of our private sector mental health treatment
Yeah.
facilities, and we've replaced those with facilities in the criminal justice system. Our jails, our prisons are the largest mental health facilities in the country.
Really?
And so if someone gets arrested, they get convicted historically, and they get
Yeah.
their mental health treatment in the jail or in the prison. But through criminal justice reform, through bail reform, we don't want to hold those people anymore. And so we're using, especially for that guy, it was a King's X on their criminal case. So they just dismissed the criminal case and got him out of the system because they didn't want to spend any money on him for his mental health. But they were releasing him and he got no treatment. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
on that case, his mother had kicked him out because she
Yes, she
couldn't
did.
control him. And she was saying, look, this guy needed to be in jail. And so they had many opportunities to hold him and didn't because they used the King's X of his mental health. And now here we are. I've actually been critical of that because if he was not competent to stand trial on those minor charges, how is he competent to stand trial now? But the courts have both held, both the federal and the state, that he's not competent to stand
Yeah,
trial.
they
So,
did. Yeah.
and so now the problem is he committed a severe crime, so they didn't want to let him go. And so now they're going to hold him in a mental health facility and try to resurrect him to be competent to stand trial, or they call it rehabilitate him.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but why couldn't we have done that a long time ago? It's because they wanted to try to save a little money and put that money into social programs instead of figuring out, well, if we're going to get rid of him in the criminal justice system, what treatment are we going to give him in the private industry? None.
Right.
None was given to him, and that's the reason why that happened.
How does electronic monitoring factor in if we have a case like that, for example, or anybody that can't make the bond or they get the simple release? How does electronic monitoring factor into that?
Well, I think that the activists on the left think that electronic monitoring is the panacea. That's the quick fix. We don't need the private industry because we can just use GPS monitoring. The problem is I don't think people realize GPS monitoring is more expensive than the private industry, and it doesn't provide any supervision. It just provides a beep. And, the problem with GPS monitoring, it has a high level of false reports. Oh, it's not charged. Okay, well, the battery needs to be replaced. Or so it has a lot of false reporting. And then, we have this terrible example of this guy from Houston
Right.
who cut his GPS monitor off like 5:30 on Friday and went from Houston to Canada, somehow got a false passport or a fake passport from a different country, and flew from Canada to Italy. And when he arrived in Turin and he tried to pass through immigration, they discovered that his passport was fake and they took him into custody. But the problem that I have with that is, he knew what he was doing. I mean, this guy's got to be a sociopath or just really smart because he knew that if he waited till after working hours on Friday, he'd get a head start. And he got a head start on Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, because even if the GPS company reported it,
Yeah.
it's sending the report to an email address that nobody was going to review until the next working day, which was Monday.
So it's not 24/7. It's only during the working day this is being
Well,
monitored.
but it's going to be monitored by the GPS company, but they're sending their
Right. That's
reports
what I'm
to
saying. Yeah.
people. So the court can, I mean, it's the court that issues the warrant, not the GPS monitoring company. And so
Uh,
they send a report to the court, to whoever's providing supervision, and says, hey, we've got a report that he cut off his monitor. And so then they would report that to the judge, and the judge would issue a warrant. Well, that wouldn't happen until Monday. And to get all that started, by then he was already in custody in Turin, Italy.
so does this happen a lot? I'm curious. How did he cut off the monitor bracelet? I mean, I thought those things
Yeah,
are
it happens a
anklets.
lot more than you think. It
So
happens a
really,
lot more than you think, especially because, these things have to be recharged every day.
yeah.
And think about it, you can't charge it while you're sleeping for some reason. So you have to charge it. And then if you don't, because, we're talking about problem children, then there's going to be a lot of reports saying, hey, this thing, the battery ran down. And you're going to get a call saying charge your device. And so it gets so many false reports. It's almost like we're desensitized to it. Okay, there's a problem. Well, there's always a problem with this one. Okay. And so it may not be looked at as closely.
Yeah.
Um, and especially if, it's got the report goes to the supervising department. And what if
Hmm.
that person was on vacation the next week? Well, they wouldn't get it till the next day they were back.
Yeah.
And so, and then when they get it and they go, oh, well, this is a problem. Well, then they have to file a report with the court and ask, and the court has to review it and issue a warrant. And then, like for a lot of stuff I deal with, they have time to enter the warrant into the system. I've got situations where they have 5 business days to issue the warrant, and then they have 5 business days to enter the warrant into the criminal justice system reporting system. So, I
Mm.
mean, that could be 10 days right there. And that's after we recognize an issue and report it to the judge, and the judge decides to issue a warrant.
This conversation is eye opening because these are things that a lot of people don't even know about the
Well,
way
and you
there are so
compare
many
that.
breakdowns. Yeah.
Well, and compare how expensive that is to
Right.
if the private industry was involved. He's reporting to them. He's reporting to them once a week or biweekly. For a case like this, he might be reporting biweekly. And if we see something or something gets reported to us, we can approach the judge and ask him to issue a warrant. And then that
Hmm.
gives us the tools to then go and get him arrested. So we have an incentive to go get the warrant and then follow the warrant and give it served on the guy and have him returned to custody. It's the problem. That's the problem here. If you issue a warrant on a GPS monitor, I mean, I don't think the public realizes that warrant gets issued by the judge. It goes down the hall in the sheriff's office and it joins all the tens of thousands of other warrants waiting to be served. And so as a result, most times the way they get back into the system is by committing another
Commit
crime.
another crime. Right. Right. And I think the problem that we have, Ken, is that so many people have been conditioned or are used to seeing law and order and used to seeing things happen really
Hmm.
quickly.
Hmm.
So that's how
Hmm.
they assume it works in our criminal justice system. But it doesn't work that way. It seems like there's
No,
so many
no.
breakdowns. Yeah. Because I always wondered, why does it take 2 years for a case to come to trial? But now it
Two,
makes sense.
yeah, four,
Yeah.
four. Well, and the
Yeah.
sad thing is, I agree with you. Law and order makes it sound like everybody wants to get cases resolved. The problem in the real world, especially in our urban cities, people are being taught don't cooperate with the police. Look at the whole
Hmm.
campaign on defund the police. One of the side effects is you don't want to cooperate with the police or you're
Hmm.
scared to cooperate with the police. You can't prosecute a case when you don't have any witnesses, if you don't have everybody that'll cooperate. And so I think one of the stories that we don't really hear about a lot is unreported cases, cases
Hmm.
that are, crimes that are not reported. And then you've got the closure. What percent of cases that are reported are actually closed? And I think people would be shocked about that as well.
Yeah, you're right because there's so many cases. I know we there's some here in Charlotte, and I talk a lot about this. How there's so
Yeah,
many.
Charlotte's a hot
Yeah,
spot. I think
yeah,
you would probably agree with that.
yeah. Charlotte is a hot spot, and it is because there's so many people moving here. And again, there is a lack of people willing and wanting to be officers because, and I think that was intentional. I think
But also, your politicians are selling soft on crime policies. They're saying, "Oh, we need to be more forgiving, and if
yeah,
we release more criminals, we'll be safer." Which is, I mean, that's an oxymoron. I mean, if you show criminals that you're going to be soft on crime, they know what to do about that, and that's what I mean. The science even says that that's what will happen. There was a DA in Yolo County in California that kept all of his data during COVID, and he compared uh, nonviolent offenders released on a private surety bond versus nonviolent offenders released on simple release, no cash bail. And he found that the person released on no cash bail had a 200% greater chance of committing a new violent offense in the next 18 months. Now, that's just on the release mechanism. And it's because of the greater supervision being provided by the private industry. And it's also them getting family involved. If you can imagine, family can have a lot of influence on their loved ones. And I mean, I feel like a lot of this bail reform, criminal justice reform is we're giving up on families to have that last chance to turn their loved ones around to be productive citizens.
right,
And I don't think we realize that.
right, right. When you say private industry, Ken, what exactly are you referring to? I just want to make
A
sure
bail
I
bondsman.
understand.
I mean, a
Okay,
bail bondsman is a private industry. I mean, instead
okay,
of a simple release, there's someone that's offering their services to post a bond for somebody to guarantee their appearance for court, which means they're going to have to report to them. We use, the higher the risk, we're going to have family involved,
okay,
standing up for them and saying, yeah, we think that you can do this. And so, that's kind of the secret sauce to the private industry. When you take away all of that accountability, then, you know, people will not, these are problem children.
right.
Then they won't respond. I mean, this is a cycle that we've done before. And the first time the cycle was kind of in the 60s, and we were soft on crime. We did soft on crime policies, and we started having crime go up. And what group started turning it around? It was our black preachers in our urban areas,
Yeah,
because they saw what these policies were doing to young
yeah,
black males.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
look today. 50% of all murder victims are young black males. And by and large, we commit crime within our social economic group. So that means the murderers are young black males predominantly. And somewhere in this criminal justice crazy reform movement, we've decided to favor the young black male murderer over the young black male decedent. And that's crazy.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. But you're right. There's a sentiment out there to give rights to the criminals and not the victims, not to make sure the perpetrators are well taken care of and not the people they've perpetrated the crime against. And when it comes to young people, young black people, I mean, homicide is the leading cause of death within a certain age range, which is not baffling. I understand why, but it's sad to me. And then it seems like there's not enough push, and that's the sad part about it, when people are looking to cover for the criminal instead of pushing for reform that leads to changes in the community. That's the sad part about it. When you see
But
more and
I
more,
think
yeah,
I think it's all politics. If you
yeah,
think
it
about
is.
it, let's go back 4 or 5 election cycles, and about 6 months before every election, there was something racial related in the criminal justice system, and there would be massive protests. And we had one side of the electorate being told, you're being mistreated and you need to get mad about it. And you need to come out in large numbers and vote for us and we'll fix it.
Oh yeah,
But the problem was, after the election, we went back to business as usual. And as a result, over time, a mob was started, and the mob started voting for fellow mob members. And that's how, in my opinion, we got the AOCs. That's how we got the new mayor of New York
yeah,
City.
Yeah.
those are the true believers.
Right.
They're members of the mob. And so, we've got the activists telling the mob that they're being mistreated. And so now they're electing people that are going to enact policies that agree with that. And I
Mm-hmm.
would argue that the whole thing was set up just to win a couple of elections. And now the activists are losing control of the mob. I mean, they
Yeah.
never would have supported some of these the activist ideas, but now they're in a box because the
Mm-hmm.
activists will tell them, if you don't support this, we'll get somebody and we'll run them against you and they'll support it.
Yeah.
And that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of like the old party bosses. You'll do what we tell you to, or we'll replace you. And that's
Yeah.
where we are.
Yeah. 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 I think they started off, it was politically motivated. We can capitalize upon the emotions of people and maybe a legitimate reason, maybe legitimate cases, but we can capitalize upon the emotions of the people and get them to vote for us. And then we're not going to do anything for them. But eventually it has burned them because now
Yeah.
you're right. The people that they pretended to care for are now the ones that are starting to gain power and gain control. And now they're going to push them out and really
Well, and the
enact things
ultimate
that hurts the people.
And the
Yeah.
ultimate irony is the people they claim that they're seeking to help is the very group that will be hurt the worst
Mm-hmm.
with these
Yeah.
policies if they were to enact them,
Right.
because crime goes up quicker in our minority communities than it does
Mm-hmm.
anywhere else. So
Mm-hmm.
if we enact, I mean, aren't we really through these policies in reality going back to that dark time in our country? Whereas if you committed crime within your racial group and it was certain racial groups, we didn't care.
Yeah.
And that's why crime
yeah.
went up there.
Eh,
And the reason why we have a disproportionate amount, in my opinion, of certain races in jails is because we started caring.
yeah. And I think part of that is that, and I think there were some things that are probably done incorrectly too. But to your point, I think the issue is people don't care because if a young black man kills another young black man, it's not going to make headline news. But let's say a police officer goes out there and unfortunately unalives that young black man, makes headline news. It generates clicks, it generates money, it generates activists to come in, and so that shows me that they don't care because you should have the
Yeah.
same amount of passion or more when you see these young people who lose their lives every day in the inner cities. But yeah, people don't
The
care.
way you know it's about politics is these same politicians have destroyed families in our urban areas. They have destroyed the schools. They have failed with the war on drugs. Drugs are epidemic in our urban areas.
Mm-hmm.
And during the George Floyd thing, we had a lot of economic opportunities destroyed by fire.
Yep.
And so now those same politicians that failed at all those things are saying, "Oh, we can fix this, and we'll do it by reforming the criminal justice system to have no accountability and to increase crime on those very minority groups." No, the only way this makes sense is it's politics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now they're trying to steer the mob that they've lost control over.
That's a whole strategy. The whole strategy: create chaos and then be the one to come in and be the solution for it. But I think they've pushed it a little bit too far to where that chaos is overrunning them, and they don't know how to handle it.
Well, I agree with you. And I think it's just we're committing the same cycle as the 60s, because in the 60s we had that backlash. And that's what gave us one of the reasons why we had President Reagan and his war on drugs. And I do think that and immigration policies, one of the reasons why Trump 2.0 was elected.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. It was. It was. I definitely think that was the reason why Trump was able to win.
Well, and the crime policy and the immigration policy are so intertwined; it's ridiculous. I mean, it's the same thing. Oh, we can't have a secure border without a new law that allows anybody to come in, and so we can't have public safety without new laws that lets anybody go. It's very
Right.
similar policies.
Right.
Soft on
right.
crimes, open borders.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. So let me ask you this question. Do you think there is some reform that needs to be done to the criminal justice system in some ways? I mean, we talked about how there are different loopholes and different gaps when it comes to certain things, but what are your thoughts about some type of reform to help remedy the issues that we're facing?
Well, we're always looking for ways to improve the criminal justice system. Usually, anything that helps the criminal justice system will help, the bail bond business or bail bond industry because they're so intertwined. Like in Texas, according to the latest report from the Office of Court Administration, the private bail industry is responsible for 80-something% of all releases in Texas. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what the report says. Now, but the problem is we're going in the wrong area in our urban areas. We're creating simple release, which is going to cause a 50, 60, 80% failure to appear rate. And how can you get cases resolved when you have that kind of a failure to appear rate? I mean, in California, I did a podcast with, a DA who said all misdemeanors in California use simple release and they have an 80% failure to appear rate. And on top of that, they have a speedy trial requirement. So if they miss court and don't come back at a certain point in time, the case has to be dismissed because they didn't meet the speedy trial requirements. I mean, so you can imagine you're turning the whole criminal justice chicken coop over to the chickens to run.
Yeah, they're running it right into the ground for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. So if you were, hypothetically, let's say you were a policymaker, what would be some of the things you would push to help fortify the criminal justice system? And what would be some of the things you would remove to help fortify the criminal justice system?
Well, in Texas, we've done several rounds of criminal justice reform, bail reform, but we've gone the opposite direction of the rest of our urban areas. And one of the things that we've done is that we've limited the use of simple release. So we've made a list of crimes, like New York has made a list of crimes that if you are on that list, you are simply released. Texas has made a list of crimes that says if you commit one of these crimes, you're not eligible for simple release. And so the rest they leave up to the discretion of the trial court. But here's a list that you're not eligible for release on simple release. And I think that's been very effective. It ties the hands of the activists in the opposite direction. They still have discretion. If they want to release them on $1 bond, they can, but they just can't release them on a personal bond. So I think that's one of the things that they've done. But, the second thing Texas did that I think is very important, and it just sounds like common sense, is that's a requirement that judges review criminal histories before setting bail. I mean, Texas just added that 2 or 3 legislative sessions ago, and you would have thought before then, it just makes common sense. Why wouldn't a judge review criminal histories? But the problem is Texas didn't have the capability of displaying it for the judges. So it was a technology issue. Okay. We didn't have a central database to store it, and we didn't have a way to display it to the judge. So we've now made a huge investment, and we now do that. So, but I think what's getting missed right now with this criminal justice reform, bail reform is accountability. Okay. We're losing all of our accountability. So if a defendant can miss court 17 times and he just keeps getting arrested and released again the same way, I mean, they're not learning a lesson. And the police are spending all their time arresting them and releasing them, arresting them and releasing them. And so we're wasting a lot of our criminal justice resources for silly stuff. So I think if we could just add a strong element of accountability, which we've historically had in our criminal justice system. There's other minor changes that I would always make, but like this is a silly one that also sounds like common sense. But if you plead guilty to certain offenses, or if you get tried and the jury finds you guilty, Texas, the judge had the ability to say, okay, well, we're not going to sentence you for 2 weeks. So you go home, you get all your affairs in order, and you come back. And in 2 weeks, I'm going to send you to jail the rest of your life. Well, we had problems with that. And so now for certain offenses, the judge doesn't have the discretion to do that anymore. They have to go into custody and they'll be held until their sentencing. And, why would we need to tell judges not to let them go home? Why do we have to come up with that? Why do we have to come up with those rules? Yeah. I think there are a lot of ways with technology that we can improve the criminal justice system, but I would get rid of all these algorithms that we're experimenting with. The simple release, I think if we have to have it for the poor or first-time offenders, fine, we have to have it as an option. But if the Yolo County studies are correct, anytime we're using that, we're putting that person at a greater risk of ending up in a worse position than they already are. So I would use it very sparingly, because just the type of release mechanism, you can get your backlog can get smaller just by using more surety bonds. And so I would be considered a law and order judge, I promise you. But I would be working on my backlog extensively.
Okay.
And so I would do all the things that we know how to reduce crime. And it would, if you miss my court and you fail to show up, you're not going to get 17 chances. You may not get 2. You're going to have a really good excuse for 1.
And what are your thoughts about, is there anything we can do when it comes to electronic monitoring, any reforms, any things we can do to fix that, to make that better, a better process than what it is right now?
Well, I think that electronic monitoring is expensive. And so it may be even more expensive than the private industry. It's just, the activists like the thought of it because it gets rid of the private industry. I think the activists want to get rid of the private industry no matter what.
Gotcha.
And so once they got rid of them, they don't care if the system collapses. Yep. And so I think it's really hard to find a compromise with the activists because they won't admit when something's not working.
Yeah.
So I would be GPS should be supplement to what you're already doing. It shouldn't be the only thing you're doing. So if you're on a private surety bond and then you want to add GPS monitoring, sure. But if you're just going to do GPS by itself, it's not a replacement. It's a supplement.
How can people hear more information like this, be educated about our bond system, criminal justice system? How can they follow you and get in touch and listen to your podcast?
You can go to our website, pbtx.com, the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, pbtx.com. We have a blog where we highlight important criminal justice stories. We also have our own podcast. There's a link on the menu, or you can just go to thebellpost.com. And all we do is talk about criminal justice issues, what works, what doesn't work, what are the new statutes that have been passed in Texas, and highlight. So education of our industry, but also education of the public.